Smaulgld.
Hello and welcome to another Smaulgld live stream. It is Saturday, the 28th of September, 2019, and that means it is Saturday Night Silver with Smaulgld. And tonight's topic is silver's secret weapon. And spoiler alert, no, it's not yoga pants. We're going to give you a number of silver's secret weapons tonight. But first, let me just let you know that earlier today we had another live stream and we covered the August Russian gold reserve numbers. They were pretty decent. The big story there with Russia is that they continue to add gold, and we had a bit of a debate between Bernie and Mario as to what it all means, Russian gold, and I think Seamus even chimed in, so check that out. That's already up on Patreon. It's already up on Subscribestar, the Smaulgld Mug Stacker Club, and it is available on BitChute and YouTube. All right, so let's talk about silver tonight. It is indeed Saturday Night Silver with Smaulgld, and every Saturday night we go through silver, we go through the salient numbers, and we then take your comments. So let's get into what we have for you tonight. Tonight we're going to go through the silver price, the size of the market, the stockpiles, some things that could influence the price of silver, and then of course silver's secret weapon. Well, let's just start out with the price. And price action the last week hasn't been the best. We've seen it drop down. We've been as high as $19.50 just a couple of weeks ago, and we're down about $2 from there. We're down at $17.52 so far on the year, though. You know, we started the year at about $14, $14.50, $14.50, and got as high as $19.50, and right now we're at $17.50. My year-end 2018 prediction was silver, quote, set to skyrocket $20 to $22. So we still have another few months to see if that prediction comes true. A lot of my predictions have come. I'm not in the business of making predictions, but I've been absolutely right on the direction of interest rates since 2013, when most alternative financial media commentators were insisting the Fed could never raise rates, wouldn't raise rates. Well, they're only going to raise them a bit. Well, they raised them about 8 or 9 times, and finally they threw the towel in and realized that they would raise them. I said all along the Fed would raise rates. They would get them to about 2.5%. I got close. I got to 2.25%. And I gave all the rationale as to why it would happen. And it all turned out to be true over the last 5 years. And then earlier this year, I said the Fed would cut interest rates when people were counting how many times they were going to raise rates this year. And of course, they've already lowered rates twice. I predicted one rate cut in September. They actually did one earlier. They did one in July, and they also did one in September. I've also nailed the gold-silver ratio. When people are saying the gold-silver ratio is unsustainable for 5 years, I've been saying, no, it's not. And I gave all the rationale as to why the gold-silver ratio was exactly where it should be. In fact, they even spoke on SGT report, and a lot of people didn't like it when Sean asked me, why is the gold-silver ratio so out of whack? And I said that it wasn't out of whack and that it would not come down until certain things happened. It was also correct on the dollar in China. Remember China to crush the dollar, gold, back yuan, multipolar world, Belt and Road, end of dollar hegemony. Well, look what's happening now. We have a dollar shortage. All this is documented on Smaulgld.com, Smaulgld videos, Smaulgld YouTubes. And the crypto rebound. All during the end of 2018, I was suggesting that there would be a massive rebound in cryptocurrencies. Everyone was thinking they had been given up for dead. And we saw the massive rebound of cryptocurrencies, of Bitcoin from $3,300 all the way up to $14,000. Bitcoin from $22 up to $145. They pulled back a bit, but again, I was on top of that. All right, enough of me, and let's talk about silver, because that's what we're here for tonight. Now, as I said, the big story is not yoga pants for silver. There's a bigger silver secret hidden weapon. So the silver price over the last 10 years has been anything less than sterling silver. Look at that. I mean, that is probably the worst performing asset of the last 10 years. And that's a good thing, as Bernie would say. That's a good thing. Not if you've been holding the last 10 years, perhaps if you've been buying, you've had opportunity cost misses, but it is an asset that has not gone up, and these things do go in cycles. Everything has gone up except silver. All precious metals have gone up. We saw platinum, palladium, rhodium, gold all have their turns in the last 10 years, and silver hasn't got one. All right, let's move on. What else do we have for silver that is of interest? Well, one of the things that's always the case is the size of the market. And we mentioned this that a couple of weeks ago. The silver market is tiny. Not only have you had low prices for 10 years, the market hasn't gotten any bigger. Silver mining, while it's risen and it's done well over the last 10 years, it seems to be topping out around 850 million ounces a year. But the value of the silver mining, all the ETFs, the value of all the silver that you could possibly think of if you had Hunt's Brothers intentions, where you wanted to scoop up as much physical silver as you could, you'd grab the 800 million ounces that's mined every year, the billion or so million ounces that are in the 300 million that are in the COMEX warehouse, plus the ETFs. All that silver at today's prices, if you were so inclined to grab as much physical silver as you could without having to go into the secondary market and roll up people's silverware sets, just major stockpiles and mining production would cost you under $40 billion. Now, we noted that JP Morgan, Citibank, Bank of America, just in the last 15, 20 years, they paid $110 million, $106 billion in fines. Piece of cake for them to buy something like silver, but they're not buying it. But even more astounding there's 3 individuals in the world that have net worths over 100 million each. Any one of them, if they were keeping their part of their wealth in a checking account, could write a check for the entire amount. Now you say, well, that's kind of ridiculous. No one's going to write a check for that. No one is going to buy or try to buy all of the silver. It'd be foolish to do so. But in fact, Warren Buffett in 1998 did just that for Berkshire Hathaway. They bought 100 million plus ounces, and they did it without really impacting the price. They bought it on the sly through various dealers, and they bought it over, I think, a 6 to 9 month period. And of course, from 1998 to 2006, when they held it, it did rise they got a decent return on it. They didn't get the return all the way up to $50, but they did get a decent return on it. And it is possible that someone somewhere may decide to make another run at the silver market. That's always been out there. Again, it's not the reason why silver is set to skyrocket, but it is a permanent component of the silver market that it is tiny. And what's become a permanent component, at least the last 10 years, is that the price has gone absolutely nowhere in an environment that we've seen massive amounts of new debt being taken on around the world. We've got negative interest rates. We talked the other day about we're starting to see now negative interest rates come to banks, depositor banks, not just in bonds. Bonds are negatively yielding, which makes assets that are limited in issuance more valuable, because not only when you have negative interest rates are you not getting a rate of interest, and you're actually losing the value over time, but the currency in which you've lent the money is also losing value. So you're getting a double loser. You're losing the nominal amount of dollars that you have to pay each month, and then what you have left is losing value due to inflation. So clearly, this is an environment that is healthy for precious metals. The dark side of the cashless society, the dark side of negative rates. We talked about all this over the last few years. Both of them tie together. This is part of a plan. This is part of what these central banks are doing. We also have the Bernie and Dizzy Miss Lizzie show. They look like, I believe, are going to be the front runners in the Democratic Party. While we are currently seeing the Democrats going after Donald Trump for him making a phone call to the Ukrainian leader to ask about Joe Biden's dealings with the Ukraine where his son made some money, they're making that an impeachment issue. Well, it won't be long until the issue will be, why was Trump asking about Joe Biden? What was behind that? And Joe Biden, I think, has been weakened as a candidate, not just because of that and his dealings with China, but because he's a gaffe and a half. I mean, that's historically, he never really was a good candidate, and he came out of the shadows. He had run for president in 1988. He gaffed his way through that and got 2% of the vote, and he actually had to leave the race, I believe, because he was plagiarizing a speech by Neil Kinnock, who was the Labour Party leader in England at the time. And so I just don't think he's a viable candidate, and he seems to be slurring his words. So, point is, that leaves our buddy Bernie and Dizzy Miss Lizzie, and it could be they run together. Now, the reason that is a relative positive for precious metals, one of the reasons that gold and silver, many speculate, rose wasn't just the QE that the Fed had put in place in the financial crisis, was that we had an administration in the Obama administration that got people nervous, and people wanted to put their money into a store of wealth like gold and silver. Well, Obama was never as blatant as he said spread the wealth around, but he never really was at least externally, as full-blown anti-wealth as Bernie and Dizzy Miss Lizzie are. Now, Bernie Sanders, billionaires should not exist. Okay, well, there you go. As they say, that is all I need to know. There's not much else you need to know there, but he is going on and on. Healthcare should be free. Education should be free. If you already paid your medical bills, then you should get reimbursed. I mean, he wants everything to be free. There should be no billionaires. Now, he used to say there should be no millionaires and billionaires. Well, now he's a multimillionaire. That's because I wrote a book. Okay, he wrote a book. And so millionaires are okay, but billionaires, look out. We're going to tax their extreme wealth and invest in working people. Read the plan. I wrote the damn plan. So extreme wealth is now a new issue. Extreme wealth, not poverty, just that somebody has a lot of money, and that's how we're going to take them down. So this is all very good news, I guess, if you are worried about economic calamity, because it's not just free healthcare, it's not just free education, it's not just free whatever you can think of. We're also going to end homelessness and build millions of new affordable housing units, paid for with a tax on the billionaire class. Now, first of all, you could just take all the money away from the billionaires. It wouldn't pay for all these plans, but economics was never Bernie's strong point. And, of course, he's got the old, we're going to make the wealthy pay their fair share. I don't know what fair share is. What does that mean? What is the fair share? Fair share of what? Just means they have money and he wants it and he doesn't know how else to get it, so he's going to tax it. And, of course, this one, I love this one. Getting an education isn't a crime. We need to cancel every penny of student debt. No, and it's not a crime to borrow money to pay for something that you want. Now, it may be a crime what they charge, but canceling the student debt isn't going to change anything. But anyway, you can see, and this is not meant to be Bernie bashing, but the idea is these plans are not economically sound. This is why we need Medicare for all. Your health care should never be in the hands of greedy corporations who can take it away to punish workers. That's what a company exists for, to punish workers. This is how he actually thinks. I don't know what this is, we will guarantee health care for all with no copays, premiums, or deductibles. Oh, okay, so who's going to pay for it? Well, you are. You're going to pay more in taxes. So whenever you have taxes paid for something, you go back to the Milton Friedman in the fourth box. When you use your own money to buy something for yourself, you try to get good value. When you use your own money to buy something for someone else, you try to get decent value, but not as concerned. When you use somebody else's money, like an expense account to buy something for yourself, you try to get some decent value, but you're not that concerned about it. Should I get the filet mignon or should I get the lobster and get a little surf and turf going? You probably go with both if it's not an expense account. But when you use somebody else's money to pay for somebody else's stuff, you can give a flying, and that explains, as he says, public education. And that's what Bernie wants. He wants to take the money from the millionaires and the billionaires and then give it to you in the form of some type of health care. And it doesn't end there. Teachers, we, again, the collective we will no longer tolerate teachers all over America having to work 2 or 3 jobs to get by. Now, I don't know what he's going to do about this, unless he's going to nationalize education, because education is funded at the state and the local level, and whatever they pay, it's through property taxes. So I guess he wants to put a national tax and pay teachers. I have no idea what he's talking about here. But he was proud to stand last night with the CTL Local 1, and we're going to win and give teachers the life they deserve. I don't know what they deserve. I don't know what anyone deserves, but Bernie knows, and he has got a dollar figure on it. So that is coming up, and then person who's probably ahead of him is Dizzy Miss Lizzie, and Wall Street is already concerned about that. If Wall Street is saying this, most Wall Streeters are Democrats. Your big banks ahead, because the bailout people, Buffett and Gates, all the richest people, Bezos, they're all Democrats. So when Wall Street Democratic donors say they may back Trump if Warren is nominated, that's a lookout. And she's of the same view. She wants to tax wealth. Now, taxing income is, I guess it's legal in its constitution today, but actually taxing wealth is in a sense a taking of property, because if you already own something, and I guess they get away with it with property taxes, because I'm sure they can get away with it on a wealth tax. But what Dizzy wants to do is, if you have 50, I think it's 50 million, it's not that high, it's high, it's still $50 million, but if you have $50 million, I don't know how they're going to do this. I guess you have to add up everything you have, and if it's over $50 million, they start to tax it. And of course, it won't stop at $50 million. Then it'll be $25 million. Then it'll be $1 million. Just like the income tax when it first came out, it was supposed to be a tax on the 1%. Yes, they didn't use those terms back then. But now, basically, almost everyone pays taxes unless you don't make enough to hit the threshold. So that's another reason, but we're still not at the reason, the secret weapon that silver has. India. Now, India, we mentioned a couple of weekends ago, is a big buyer of jewelry and silverware. That's their number one reason to buy silver. They're not stackers. They don't stack silver. They don't view it as like the same store of wealth as like they do gold. But yet, there's a huge middle class that's growing. They don't dislike silver. It's just not gold, but that doesn't stop them from buying it, and they import lots of it. They use it in industry, but as you can see on the chart, the percentage of silver that's used in industry, it stays around 55 to 70% last few years. People buy coins and bars, but the one that's growing steadily is silverware and jewelry, and that's largely on the back of India. No one really, when I say no one, most silverware is not the big seller it once was in the United States, other places, but in India it's on the rise. And Indians buying silver, well, when the gold price goes up, we've talked about what happens with Indians. Americans and Westerners and even the Chinese, they may want to buy gold as it's going up. They may be concerned. Indians are such seasoned gold buyers, and when the price goes up, they don't get FOMO. They get FOOP, fear of overpaying. They don't want to pay. And so we're seeing stories coming out now saying that Indian gold imports are 70% lower year over year. They're heading down because the price is going higher. And that makes sense. But that's not stopping them from buying silver. Why? Silver hasn't really gone up that much. And in fact, it's headed back down, and that's going to drive silver demand. Here's another story. Indian gold imports plunged 71%. This is in Yahoo Finance, Yahoo India. Mumbai Indian gold imports in August slumped to 32.11 trillion rupee from 111.48. Oh, that's tons. 32 tons from 111 tons, not rupee, according to the Director General of Commercial, whatever it is, in India. That's a huge drop, but we haven't seen that drop in silver. As the price between gold and silver increases, at least in India, silver demand picks up. And if we continue to see this, there'll be pressure on silver. Silver will be... See, so silver is not a substitute for gold. I think people think of it as just as cheaper gold. It becomes a monetary elective when gold goes higher. It becomes something that maybe you can't buy gold anymore, but you can still buy silver. And maybe some of that money that you might have spent on gold, you spend that extra bit on silver. So definitely, silver benefits from the higher gold price. But it's not just India. We have Mario Draghi and Christine Lagarde. Now, they are actually more dangerous than Bernie and Dizzy Miss Lizzie. Why? Because Bernie and Dizzy may not make it. I mean, that is a tough putt to sell that type of palaver to the American people. Now, granted, there are people who believe that everything should be free, but there are also a lot of people who realize that in order to get the free stuff, they're going to have to pay more in taxes, which means in the aggregate, it won't be free. And then when Bernie and Lizzie are for not just the free health care for every citizen, but for everyone who just happens to be in the country legally or illegally. And they're going to lose some people who may think, oh, it might be a good idea, because I don't think 50% of the people believe that the United States, if anyone understands the United States fiscal condition, the $21 trillion in debt that we have, it's already very hard to justify increasing benefits, Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, student loans, whatever we want to give away for free when you already have this debt, this ridiculous deficit, except if you can use modern monetary theory. Now, what is modern monetary theory? Well, it argues that you got a rich country, and in the words of Mario Draghi, if you have a problem and the economy is a little slow, or you need to produce some wealth for the country, like giving everyone health care or free education or building some infrastructure that may not be economically sound, what do? You print the money. So if you print the money, then the modern monetary theory takes care of itself and you don't have this issue anymore. You printed the money. Well, it's okay for Bernie to say, we're going to print money and we're going to give everyone everything for free. He might not win. Well, Mario Draghi's already won. He's the head of the second largest central bank in the world, the European Central Bank, and he is entertaining not just, well, we have the negative interest rates, but if we want to do the helicopter money, right now that's fiscal policy, not the monetary policy. Okay, so he's already on board with it. He's just saying, it's not my job at the moment to do this. But we should look at ideas like modern monetary theory. Okay. He's already put the European Union into $6 trillion worth of QE, negative interest rates, and he's getting ready to sail off into the sunset. And you think, well, his successor, maybe he's a little more grounded in economic reality. Not so fast. I mean, Mario Draghi is saying modern monetary theory. Well, Christine Lagarde, who will be his successor, she believes in like the magic 8-ball. We played for you the other night a clip of her talking about numerology. And there she is testing. Look it up. Christine Lagarde and the Magic 7. She lectures the National Press Club on why 2014 will be a special year. And she was throwing the numbers out there. I mean, she might as well have the Ouija board out. So that is where Europe is headed. It's not the threat of Bernie and Dizzy bringing modern monetary theory to the world, but Europe clearly on a path of this type of thing, and that I think is very favorable. But that's not the real hidden secret for silver. The real one is, it's a 4-letter word, and it's gold. Everything I just mentioned just screams for gold. Doesn't scream for silver. I know a lot of people like silver say it does, but it doesn't. It screams for gold. Gold is the go-to metal around the world. In India, in China. We mentioned a while back, and we showed the statistics, the Chinese actually purchase less investment silver than the Americans, not on a per capita basis, but on an actual basis. So the population is 4 times higher, and they buy less silver. They're not silver. They buy massive amounts of gold. Most years, they buy more than India does. China is gold nuts. India is gold nuts. That doesn't sound right. Gold nuts. Gold bugs. They are gold bugs. Germans buy a lot of gold. Turks buy a lot of gold. Okay, but all of this that we've mentioned, and tomorrow night on Solid Gold Sunday with Smaulgld, I have some more gold charts and some data that'll show you why gold probably is, quote, set to skyrocket no matter what happens in the United States. But let's take a look here. So the Dow Jones is held up pretty well versus gold, even though gold is going higher. The Dow Jones is kind of hanging in there. Now we know what's going to happen at some point, that the Dow Jones will not be able to withstand higher and higher valuations without more profits. Now, they've managed to pump this stuff up to the point where profits almost don't matter, but at some point they do. You just can't, I mean, unicorn stocks can't live forever. I suppose that's the concept behind them, that they can. But companies that don't make any money, don't make any profit, eventually will not get funded by the market to continue funding the losses. So a lot of companies, they go public, they raise $1 billion, $500 million. That's enough for them to lose $50 million a year for 10 years. So they do that, but before they even get close to running out of money, they raise more money. Stock price goes up, but they can't keep pushing that forever. And you can see, if you look at this chart here, the price of the stock market, the value of the stock market really has gone nowhere since the end of 2017. It's pretty much, it's gone up, it's gone down, but it's not on the same trajectory, like just going higher. Whereas gold, you can see, has really made a nice run in the last just year or so. And then the Dow Jones ratio is, with gold, the Dow gold ratio is still pretty high. That's because the Dow Jones is very high. And there's a long way to go before gold becomes overvalued compared to the Dow Jones. Right now, I'd say, it's 17, 18. It's undervalued. But let's look at silver. The Dow silver ratio. I mean, it's ridiculous. I mean, it takes you 17, 18 ounces of gold to buy the Dow. It takes you 1,500 ounces of silver. I mean, look at that. It is, back in 2011 at the peak of silver at $50 an ounce, it was like $220. So it's way, way up there. And this all ties into the same concept. It's on point that investors are going to see this is a place where there hasn't been any movement the last 10 years. And that it's relative valuation. I'm not talking the gold-silver ratio unsustainable. I'm just talking about in general. But here is where we need to look at the stockpiles. This is where it gets very interesting. Is over the last few years, and don't think this, I think this has a lot to do with savvy investors starting to place their bets in silver. Look at this. The silver ETF demand in the last 8-10 weeks has really, quote, skyrocketed. A lot of money pouring into silver ETFs. You can see it move straight up. We're also seeing the COMEX vaults. I mean, look at this. The amount of silver in registerable, tradable form really almost doubling, actually more than doubling since 2017, going from about 175 million ounces to 313 million ounces. This is silver in the COMEX warehouses. So again, you got COMEX warehouses, which, let me just show you the individual warehouses. Brinks, look at Brinks. Brinks warehouse, boom, 50 million ounces, up from 20 million ounces a year or so ago. Coins and things, look at this one. I mean, they used to be a bit player with 10 million ounces. They got close to 50 million ounces now of silver in eligible form. 1,000 ounce bars, 9999 silver. You got HSBC. They've got some silver. They're more focused on gold. They own 66% of the gold in the COMEX silver approved warehouses, gold warehouses, but they still got 30 million ounces of silver available to trade. And the big one, JP Morgan, 153 million ounces. And look at that. So it's not just JP Morgan. They're all really adding up. And this tells me that they want to have it there, so when they want to trade it, they can trade it. And then here we have a picture of the depositories. Now, what's interesting is the last 8 weeks we've seen big rises in the ETFs. They kind of fell off just a little bit, and they've been up like 30 or 40%. We're seeing gold money up now, 4%. That represents your retail market. They're seeing big increases. Bullion Vault seeing increases in the amount of silver. So we're seeing that, and then also here's another chart of the aggregate amount of total ounces. So the stockpiles right now, identifiable stockpiles, not in terms of value, but in terms of number of ounces, it appears to be at an all-time high, at least if we're not taking into account when the U.S. used to have a strategic silver stockpile. This is privately held silver stockpiles that people are aware of, that are held in ETFs and COMEX warehouses. It's a lot. 1,138 million ounces. Lots of silver. And look how much has just been added. 138 million ounces in the last 10 weeks. And that's a lot of silver. So, the real secret weapon for silver is gold. Gold is right now, when we see tomorrow, when we look at the charts tomorrow on gold held in custody, the gold to the debt and gold to the money supply, you'll see that gold really is poised, and gold is going to get too expensive. And that's when silver will, I believe, people will look at that silver. It'll be the poor man's silver. This is a story I've been hearing for 10 years, but I think it's about to happen because gold really has broken out. And while it's come down in the last couple of weeks, nothing has changed. We just went through Draghi and Lagarde and the U.S. politics and the negative interest rates and the modern monetary theory and the cashless society and buying assets and doing QE. And I don't make as big of a deal out of the repo market, but still, that indicates stresses in the financial system, not enough cash, not enough dollars. Means they're going to have to print it. Printed the money means the gold goes higher. That's what I think is going to happen. And if the gold goes higher, then the silver is going to follow. That's how it works. But also we have the end of the central bank gold agreements. And it's very symbolic, as we mentioned earlier today, on Russia's buying gold. And Russia is never part of these gold buying agreements. But the European banks had agreements amongst themselves not to sell gold. And they've had these since 1998, 1999. They lasted a few years and they kept renewing them. And now they don't have these agreements anymore. The rationale is no one wants to sell their gold. Okay. Doesn't mean anyone wants to buy it. Well, I don't know. Right now, we have not yet seen, and I think it will be a stampede if we get a Western central bank that starts adding gold. Because if you remember, let's take a look. I didn't plan it, but let me see tonight. Last night, or earlier today, we were looking at the, I think it's right here. Yeah, central bank gold reserves. And we were talking about Russia and where Russia is. There's a chart. Okay. The only banks that are adding in this list, this top 20, are Russia and China. No, they're not part of the Western hegemony, so to speak. And Kazakhstan is adding, and Uzbekistan. But the United States, I mean, it'd be a massive announcement if Trump directed the Treasury to go out and add gold to reserves. That would just set a stampede. Germany, number 2, actually sells gold every year, 4 tons a year. They made a big deal about repatriating, and they did it. They repatriated from the New York Fed. They repatriated from the Bank of England, and they still have some in the United States, but they're not adding gold. Italy and France haven't added gold, and Italy was talking about selling it, but that was because they wanted to raise the money. But Draghi actually said that central banks in Europe are not allowed to do anything with gold unless they talk to them first. So maybe we won't see anything coming out of Italy, France, or Germany. But if one does break and says, oh, look, we don't care what the ECB says. We want to buy gold, then they're going to buy gold. Now, Switzerland sold over 1,000 tons of gold before it joined the IMF in the early 2000s. They only have 1,000 tons. Again, if Japan were to decide to buy, they haven't bought any gold. Now, India has started over the last 9 months. They're buying gold. They were like 580 tons. They're at 620 now. The Netherlands made a big deal out of repatriating gold, did not buy any. You could see them move. Taiwan, Portugal, they haven't added any for years. Saudi Arabia, as I mentioned earlier today on the Russian podcast, that's their central bank. But I would bet the wealthy individuals, the sheiks, the shahs, whatever they have in Saudi Arabia, the wealthy people there, I'm sure they have lots of gold that we don't see. Now, the United Kingdom, that's one of the problems they have with Brexit. Maybe they might be thinking of buying gold. Who knows? But they did sell a good portion of their gold back in the early 2000s. So central banks, I think right now they're clearly not going to be selling gold. And if they were to start actually buying, and I mean a Western bank actually, it could be the United States, if they actually decided to add gold and make a public spectacle of it, that clearly any movement in gold above 1,600 will really start to shine a light on silver for all the reasons we just discussed. So let's see what you guys are talking about. Philip says, I don't think the U.S. owns as much as it says. Now, the only reason you think that, Philip, is because you've heard every gold pumper say that. And I'm going to have to stop and address that right now. All gold pumpers will tell you, the United States doesn't have any gold. The United States sold its gold. The United States, okay. And then there's all types of negative consequences for the United States not having. It's very much a cliche to say the United States doesn't have gold or make jokes. I have more gold than the United States has. There's no gold at Fort Knox. That story is very ridiculous. Because if it was very important for the United States, these are the same people that say what the United States does is invades country like Iraq and steals their gold. But somehow the United States doesn't have any gold. Now, why would the United States not have any gold if it was important to have it? Of all the countries in the world that could possibly, through its military power, through its financial power, the printing press, acquire gold, why wouldn't they have it if it was important to have it? Why do people think that the United States doesn't have gold, but all these third world countries and China somehow, they believe those numbers? I don't know why people want to believe that. I think it's the gold pumpers have, what they're trying to do is undermine the United States and say, well, that's the whole dollar collapse, end of dollar hegemony, dollars built on a grain of sand, there's no gold at Fort Knox. Nonsense. Why believe that? Because if it was important to have gold, you don't think the United States could have gold? The United States mines 300 tons of gold a year, 200 to 300 tons of gold a year. If somehow the gold wasn't there, like for whatever wacky reason it was stolen in the middle of the night, India, you can import 1,000 tons of gold a year, like India does, and not move the price of gold. So if somehow the United States was missing 8,000 tons of gold, which I don't think they are, it wouldn't be hard for them to go and get it. They can either go and steal it, as everyone says. They can print the amount. Do you realize that Russia's 2,200 tons of gold is only worth $107 billion? Like the United States couldn't find $107 billion and get 2,000 tons of gold quick, fast, and in a hurry. They printed up $200 billion a month during QE. So you got to look at the numbers and think, why do you believe that? The only reason you believe that is because every gold pumper has presented that as fact. Oh, because they don't audit it. Why does the United States need to audit the gold? To prove that it's there. Prove to whom? To whom does the United States have to prove they have gold? Richard Nixon explicitly stated in 1971 when he took the world off the gold standard. He said, the value of the dollar is based on the strength of the nation's economy. It's not based on how much gold it has. So why would the United States even want to show the world how much gold it has? Because it's not trying to say that there's any connection between the dollar and gold. So why are they going to run through the rigmarole of doing an audit? Well, to prove to whom? To prove to people who are buying gold? They don't have to prove anything to those people. So I don't understand why the gold pumper community insists the United States has none and China has so much and they're going to roll into a stadium and then it's going to be game over and game. I mean, it's such nonsense. First of all, China is not necessarily lying. We've discussed this so many times. It's a Sun Tzu deception. They have more gold. It's funny, the people that say that China's lying and it's some type of Sun Tzu deception, in the same breath they say that the yuan should be the world's reserve currency. No country is going to get the world's reserve currency if it's known for lying. So that's not going to happen. And it's the same double talk that we heard about the gold-backed yuan. When they made that story up, they said they were going to force Saudi Arabia to accept the petro-yuan, and that Saudi Arabia was going to have to take yuan, the supposed big currency that everyone would want because it was going to end dollar hegemony and crush the dollar because China is the best and all that. Well, even Jim Rickards in his explanation was saying, well, then maybe Saudi Arabia won't want it, but China just announced, they didn't, that they can take those yuan, Saudi Arabia can take those yuan over to the Shanghai Gold Exchange and get gold for them. No, they can't. China was never going to allow that. They don't allow that. You can't get the gold out of the country. Then when Mike Maloney realized that couldn't happen, they created this other silly story about how, well, then they're gonna go out and buy gold on the open market. Well, they can do that right now with the dollars that they get. None of this makes any sense. It's all designed to make people believe the United States has no gold and China has gold, as if that really, really, really mattered. First of all, it doesn't. That's not how the world is run, by which country has the most gold reserves. The old, who has the gold rules. Okay, so Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan, they're in the top 15, so they're 13. So they're like they're ruling countries because they have that much gold. No, they're not. But if it was that important and the United States knew it was important, you don't think they couldn't have retained 5,000 tons of gold at Fort Knox, which is only worth about $250 billion? Somehow the United States can't have that much gold? That is such a widespread nonsense story that everyone believes because they've heard it so much. Well, they haven't audited it since 1951, so that proves it. No, that doesn't prove anything. That just proves they haven't audited it since 1951. They don't feel the need to audit it. Who do they have to prove it to? All right, let's see what other. I'm sorry, I saw that one there, and I get that one all the time. People insisting the United States doesn't have gold, and they loaned it out, and it's apothecated, and okay, and they can if it's important to have the country with the biggest military, the largest economy, the world reserve currency, the printing press can have gold. There's no doubt about that. If you believe that somehow the United States is weaker because it doesn't have gold, and if the United States actually doesn't realize that they're weaker and they couldn't get gold to make themselves stronger, then you're not paying attention. Then you believe gold, back yuan, game changer, end of dollar hegemony, multipolar world, Belt and Road, the whole gold pumper nonsense. All right. Today we're supposed to be talking about silver. Why silver? Well, it does tie into gold. All right. So Rapunzel is here and he says he bought more silver. Carl Joseph DeMarco, Rapunzel let down your hair. Fiona is here. Hello. Carl says, why would anyone want to buy all the silver? That's like saying they're buying all the money. Mike Baloney says silver is money, so if you buy all the silver, you're buying all the money. Well, I don't believe in that silver is money story. A lot of people they actually think, well, because it's money. Yeah, well, was palladium money when it went as high as it was? It went as high as it did. Rhodium isn't money. Somehow people think that if you attach the word money to something, it's going to make it worth more. First of all, we've discussed also on this channel why gold and silver, if they're not used as active currencies, are not accepted everywhere as a medium of exchange, then at best they're dormant money. Now, gold is a bit more part of the monetary system, so you might be able to get away with calling it money, but silver's not money. It used to be. Well, it's money for 5,000 years. Okay, so it was money for 5,000 years. Horses were transportation for 5,000 years. They're not anymore. You could use a horse for transportation, but it doesn't function as that's not the main purpose of a horse. All right, Haas Farms is here. Max Strong is here. 143 Druid. One never owns property, did not pay rent, tax, and it is seized. Okay. We are renting our property from the government. Well, that is true. I mean, you look at some of the property taxes that you have to pay. Fiona Whalen, the worth of Warren and Bernie, they are for unrestricted immigration. Yes. And welfare state at the same time. You shouldn't be an Einstein to figure out that one excludes the other. You can't have both. Under modern monetary theory, you can. See, that's the thing. Oh, there's not money for the program. Well, then we print the money under modern monetary theory. So says Mario Draghi. Jack is stacking gold monthly. Haas Farm says cannabis is 300 an ounce. Wow. All right, let's see. Philip likes the 1/10 maple coins. 4 nines. You know what I understand though, Philip? On the maple leafs. And the, what's the other one? The U.S. one, the buffalo. Yes, they're pure. But the thing is, the American Gold Eagle is only 91.67. It's like 22 carats, so it's not 4 nines. But all coins that say are an ounce of gold actually have an ounce of pure gold. It's just that the gold in the Gold Eagle, it's pure, but then the coin itself, they take pure gold and they mix it with copper and a little silver, I believe, in the American Gold Eagle. Let me just check that for you. But it's the point is that there actually is pure gold in coins, sovereign coins that are not what you would think would be. If they're not 999. Yeah, so there's the American Gold Eagle is 0.9167 gold, 0.03 silver, and 0.0533 copper. But there's an ounce of pure gold in that coin. All right. Jack. Let's see if we got any other questions here. Yeah, Lagarde was twice convicted, Philip says. Absolutely. I don't know how. I mentioned this on a podcast the other day. How does somebody who's convicted of a crime, in general, I know in the United States, it's hard, not from personal experience, but just knowing that you can't go out and just get any job if you have a criminal record. They're going to want to know why you had a criminal record. They may say, no, we can't trust you in this job, and there's certain jobs that'll waive that if there's a job shortage. But I would imagine that the competition to be head of the ECB is probably enough people you can find without having to settle for Christine Lagarde. All right, Fiona Whalen. Smaulgld, you write about Christine Lagarde. She's much worse than Warren and Bernie. Well, I don't think she has any economic sense. I mean, some of the stuff she says, I saw her once talking about the SDR and numerology and... yeah, free money. She'll give it around the world. Michael Gainey. I think Mary and Chris are appointed. Let me know if I'm mistaken. There's some type of group that vote. They're not elected, that's for sure. I don't remember the ins and outs of how they were selected, but they're selected by other people in the ECB, and somehow they're okay with what she's done. And Max says Wall Street is becoming a skeptic about unicorn stocks. It seems the WeWork IPO. Yeah, they are a bit skeptic. Yes, of course they are. I mean, look how long Tesla's been given a free ride. I mean, they got cars blowing up. the guy, what's his name? Musk smoking weed on Joe Rogan. I mean, some people say, what's the big deal? Well, it is a big deal because at least half the investors think that if you're smoking dope that you don't have all your marbles. Now, people who say that's not true, it doesn't matter. It's still a perception issue. But that's the least of his worries. Him coming out and tweeting he's going to take the company private. He's got the funds lined up when he didn't. And then he says, I'm impressing my girlfriend. I mean, this is a multi-billion-dollar company and he's acting like this. And it'd be one thing if the company was raking in money hand over fist and blowing away the competition. They're not. And these companies continue to drive high valuations. Again, I don't want to sound like a pumper, but at some point, there becomes a Basta moment where they say enough of this. Chrono Bear, does Russia actually buy gold on the open market, or do they simply subsidize internal mine supply and log it as a purchase? Never looked at LBM SGA flows there. I'm pretty sure they get it from domestic mining production because the research I've done shows that they mine about 300 tons a year and they add 271 tons. I know that they buy it from their banks and the Russian banks, and I would imagine that their Russian banks are getting it from the mining supply. Wouldn't make sense, other than perhaps I don't know their ability to refine and fabricate. So they might send gold. I'll check that for tomorrow. Whether they send some to Switzerland and then have it sent back. But I would imagine that the gold that Russia actually buys, whether they refine it elsewhere, is coming from Russian mines. It wouldn't make any sense for them to import it from elsewhere. Philip's comment, we already talked about. I don't think the U.S. owns as much as it says. And there's no reason to believe or not believe that. It's just that everyone who listens to the pumpers wants to believe that the U.S. doesn't have any because it fits into the narrative that if they don't, then when we find out that they don't, it's game over and game changer and end of dollar hegemony and dollar collapse and multipolar world and China to crush the dollar and gold to go. That's why people believe that. 143 Druid, U.S. has loaned as collateral its gold to oligarchs who printed the debt. Possession is 9/10 of the law. And again, like the United States couldn't just nuke anyone who wouldn't give their gold back. I mean, that's... And by the way, even if that's true, and it was important to have 3,000 more tons. It's not that expensive. It's $100 billion for 2,000 tons. It's not that much money. So if the oligarchs somehow have this kind of control and they've walked off with $100 or $200 billion worth of gold, for show the United States couldn't get another 3,000 tons of gold? Come on. I mean, you got to think of the numbers in this. Or you just want to believe these stories about oligarchs and loan and apothecation and empty bars. And I don't know why one wants to believe that unless someone... If you look at the numbers, it makes no sense why the U.S. wouldn't have it. Even if you want to believe that it was stolen in the middle of the night or lent out to oligarchs or whatever ridiculous story you want to believe, I'll grant that it's true. The United States could replace it if they had to. Easily. It's not worth that much in current... And don't say, well, if they did, everyone would know about it. So what? India buys 1,000 tons a year on the open market. The gold price doesn't move because they buy that. United States mines 200-300 tons a year. They could just quietly buy all that up. I just don't buy that, is because it seems, even if you believe every ridiculous theory about it, you say, okay, well, a couple $100 billion and they can replace it. And then where do you go with that argument? Okay. All right. What else? With what's going on in the U.S. in politics last for years, the doubts about corruption in the U.S. are not unfounded, says Fiona. Of course not. I'm not saying that there's not corruption in any country or in the United States. I'm just saying if it's important for the U.S. to have gold, it can get gold easier than any other country on earth, with the exception of maybe China because they mine 400 tons a year. But there's no reason, if it was important to have, that China and the United States can't have gold. That somehow if China managed to have more gold than the United States, that somehow it's game over, even though China has like 10 times more debt and a collapsing economy. But they got gold. That's only when you have gold derangement syndrome and you think the world revolves around gold. It's the same with the people with Bitcoin derangement syndrome. They think the world revolves around Bitcoin. Central banks better smarten up and buy their Bitcoin. Why? All right. $1 trillion platinum coin, Timothy Geithner. Chocolate Mountain. Yeah, all this stuff. Well, that's why these channels get a lot of visitors. I was talking to a friend of mine tonight. I said, how's the channel going? I said, it's all right. I got a very good group of people who come every night, but it's not growing. And he said, that's because people want to hear, and I said, you must have heard me, because that's what I say. People want to hear their fantasies. They want to hear BS. And the best thing about these BS fantasies is if you hear them on multiple channels and you binge watch them, you become addicted to it. Then you start to believe this stuff. And then someone comes along. I got to get Mark Battaglia back on the show. He mentioned this. He says, once you start to believe these alternative theories from binge watching alternative financial media, JP Morgan's buying silver. No, they're not. Oh, they bought hundreds of millions of silver. No, they didn't. There's nothing. But once you believe that, you want to believe that, and someone comes along and says no, well, your reaction is, how dare you? You become like that little Swedish girl. How dare you take away my fantasy of gold? I should be across the ocean instead of here stacking gold and silver. I should be enjoying my life. And you get pissed off. How dare you? That's just the way things are. People want to hear nonsense once they believe in nonsense. Chocolate Mountain. And it's even interesting. Once people even start to believe, you know what? That guy's making up a bunch of BS. And he's been telling me a bunch of BS for the longest time. They still listen to it. Why? Because everyone else listens to it. So everyone goes to those channels because they want to hear what this particular person or channel has to say because they've been listening to the nonsense. They don't just say, you know what? I'm not going to listen to this anymore. But what they do with my channel is someone comes along and they hear, what? What do you mean JP Morgan doesn't have silver? What are you talking about? What do you mean they didn't buy silver? They'll say, well, I'm not going to listen to this guy. And then they never come back. And they'll go back and listen to the other guy making up stories about gold in the Grand Canyon or whatever story there happens to be. Gold back yuan. Here's one. Greatest wealth transfer in history to happen this decade, 2010. Did it happen? No. All these things, people keep coming back for it. And I guess you don't want to come back for a little dose of reality, but that's what we do. All right. Well, AG says, I trust gold much more than central bankers, of course. Philip says, anyone who does not own gold does not know history or economics. Well, that's definitely true. I mean, even, and this is the point. People don't understand, when I say gold is not money, I mean, if you just want to throw out your elements of money, I don't really care whether it meets all the elements. I had this debate with David Morgan. He was telling me, silver is money. Silver is money. I said, no, it's not. That doesn't mean it's not valuable. It just means on the one thing, one of the most important elements of money is it has to be a unit of account, which it could be, but it's not, and is used as a medium of exchange and is widely accepted. They're not. You cannot use gold and silver. That doesn't mean they're not valuable. And the other thing is, things can be valuable and not be money. We saw that with rhodium, with palladium. You don't have... So this idea that you fixate on whether something's money or not really doesn't even matter. I could care... Really, if you want to win an argument and explain to me in detail and pound down the idea that, but actually silver is money, okay, it's still money at $18, $17 an ounce. What good does it do for it to be money? So it's a silly argument in the first place. But Philip is correct that gold has something. And it's not that you're going to be able to buy coffee with it or bubble gum with it. It is a store of value. That is plain and simple. Has been. Your jewelry is not money. I mean, you can insist it is. It's not. It's not a medium of exchange. But it holds its value. Gold jewelry, that is. Yep, money printing to oblivion, American people oblivious. That is true. Okay, roof to collect. Knowing as much as you do, which is very little, do you see the coming of 2K depression? What do you do to prepare? Of the 2K depression, what's the 2K depression? The 2008 depression, do you see the coming of depression? If so, what are you doing to prepare? Okay. First of all, what is a depression? we have a situation we have lack of growth. And why do we have lack of growth? It's simple. We don't have normal economics. Normal economics is read The Wealth of Nations, or even read Peter Schiff's How Economy Grows and Why It Crashes. The best thing about Peter's book is it explains what an economy would be without intervention, without like central banks and without intervention, without money printing, without QE, without manipulation of interest rates. He shows how, in very basic form, how two people on an island can actually start to create wealth. One makes a fishing net and realizes now instead of just catching one fish a day by throwing a line in, he can start to catch many fish. He can then divide the labor. The other guy on the island can go cut trees down and make a house. He can then loan him the net to catch fish and get interest. I mean, you can see how an economy grows. It's a very... Got it from his dad. His dad actually wrote a book very similar, then Peter refined it. But that book explains why we don't have growth today, because what they've done in the financial system, because they don't like to have imbalances in the economy, which are natural, they've tried to smooth all of that stuff out through financial intervention, through central banking, through fiscal policy, monetary policy. And they've brought demand forward. China is the best example of it. And it's interesting, Peter's a big fan of China when they're doing exactly the opposite of what he would be in favor of in free market economics. You do not build skyscrapers and bridges to nowhere unless there's a market demand for them. And you certainly don't borrow money in dollars to do it. And that's what China's done. So China's a mess, and it's totally against the idea of how an economy grows. Okay, that's all grown by central planning. Well, once you've done that and you rely on your GDP and you rely growth and you rely on your employment growth to be based on printed the money, borrowing the money, and worse, borrowing dollars that you have to pay back when your currency is going down against the dollar, well, it's very hard to grow. Now, what modern monetary theory says, and it's pretty much already, I mean, they haven't formally adopted it. What they do is they printed the money. They do QE. They do anything to forestall an economic slowdown. That's why they want inflation. That's why they want to print money. That's why they want to lower interest rates. That's why they want to go to a cashless society. They do not want to allow an economy to readjust itself based on the actual demand of its economy. And part of the reason for that is the actual demand and growth of the economy today could never pay off the current debt that exists in the economy. So what do? They got to print the money. They got to print more money to keep the whole thing going. Now the question is, how long can they keep this whole, keep pumping air into the balloon? Well, if you have the pump, I don't know. I mean, and so what they're doing is they're forestalling. Think about it, we haven't had a recession in 10 years because we've been in a permanent state of this intervention, lower interest rates, QE, global QE, tax cuts. I mean, everything that they do is designed to push the economy beyond. The economy should have corrected in 2008, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. And instead, they were trying to make it recover. And so the question is, let's say they spend their last dollar, they bust the joint out, they light a match. What do? Well, there's really not much you can do. The only thing you can do as a prepper in all of this is to try to be as self-sufficient as possible. Buying gold and silver is not going to make you self-sufficient. The reason you buy anything, any financial asset, is to stay ahead of the game or to make profit in a situation where there's wealth. If there's no wealth, there's no point in having gold or silver because you can't buy it. I always like to use Venezuela. You have a lot of silver in Venezuela. Congratulations. Maybe you can buy an egg. I mean, I don't know. I don't understand. See, the idea that if the economy collapses, you're going to be rich is pretty moronic. Because you're not going to be rich because there's nothing to buy. So, I'll be able to take care of myself. The gold and silver is not going to take care of you at all. You're going to have to know how to take care of yourself, and it's not going to involve your gold or your silver. So in a real economic calamity, the more important things are your friends, your family, your weaponry, your skills, your food storage, your ability to get water. I mean, those things have nothing to do with gold and stuff. So actually prepping, the last thing I would think in a prepper, and I'm not an expert on it, but I do take precautions. I mean, a prepper needs to know and be able to do stuff and have stuff that doesn't involve gold and silver. Gold and silver are good in a recession, not in a depression. Or certainly not in Mad Max. That is pointless. That becomes a liability. What are you going to do with it? I think there's a scene in The Road, the Cormac, whatever his name, where they find gold. I'm like, okay, that's nice. And they just keep going. And what are they going to do, carry it around with them? All right, what else do we have? They'll have to create currency no matter what. Credit, no way out of the current system. No, that's right. But then the question is, AUAG, if there's no way out of it, then they just keep it going. That's why I don't believe this reset stuff. A reset, you got to remember, every day that goes by, a reset becomes more painful. So why do it? You know, they just keep, you want to say kicking the can down the road, whatever cliche you want to use. Okay, so 143 Drew says, if U.S. tried to buy 8,000 tons, gold dollar would collapse and price would go to nominal price on all. First of all, they wouldn't try to buy 8,000 tons. Second of all, they didn't lose 8,000 tons. That mean they lost all of their gold. And if they wanted to add the gold back, they wouldn't buy 8,000 tons in one shot. So all this nonsense that I've been hearing for the last 10, 20 years, that they don't have any gold, over time they could have easily gotten it back. You don't buy 8,000 tons of gold. As we mentioned, Warren Buffett managed to buy 120 million ounces of silver and no one noticed. India buys 1,000 tons of gold. If you want to keep trying to believe this nonsense, then you can say, oh, well, they couldn't do it. What happens? This is 143 Drew ID is actually doing what happens once you become vested in a narrative. You want to believe it. You've heard it a billion times. So you come up with arguments that don't make any sense to defend the fact that you want to believe that the United States doesn't have any gold. You have to go back to the beginning. You have to ask yourself a question. Do I feel lucky? You really do. You have to say, why do I believe this and why do I want to believe it? Have I convinced myself that it's true because I want to believe it, because I've heard it so much and I've vested so much time in it, and I really believe the United States doesn't have any gold? Never questioning why I would think that, only because I heard Jim Willey say it. Now, by the way, Jim Willey is now saying the good guys got the gold back. Yeah, okay. So it was stolen in the middle of the night. Now they got it back. Come on. Binge watching these channels is not good for your financial acumen. But Bix said it exactly. Yeah, well, Bix is the one who criticized me. He said, this guy doesn't understand silver. I'm like, yeah, I don't understand silver. The gold-silver ratio should be 1-to-1. Yeah, of course it should be. Okay, geez, the fantasies are rather prolific, says 143 Drew W. I know what you're going to do here, and I haven't even read it yet. What people do is they argue for the existence of one conspiracy because other conspiracies exist that are more probable. Okay, so if you want to use 9/11, you say, well, look, there it is, building 7. Okay, so building 7, false flags, Tompkin, whatever, you have them all here, Gulf of Tonkin, right? That doesn't mean that, therefore, the Fed shot Kennedy. It doesn't mean, therefore, U.S. doesn't have any gold at Fort Knox. You see, each one of them has to be taken on their own merits. You have to look at each conspiracy or each anomaly and say, okay, does this one make sense? Not, well, they got away with this, so they might as well have gotten away with that. Why? What benefit would it be for the United States not to have any gold? Think that one through. What is the incentive for the United States not to have gold? Because if there's an incentive for the United States to have gold, and you believe they can pull off Building 7, or you believe they can hide they can do all that. Why wouldn't you believe they could come up with 8,000 tons of gold? That's what I don't understand. If the United States is so powerful and can pull off all this nonsense, but somehow they can't have 8,000 tons of gold, then you really have to ask yourself a question. Are you looking at things the way you wish, or you've just decided once something is corrupt, everything is corrupt, and I'll just believe anything? Because if you actually believe, if you go through these things, look, if you go through the USS Maine, Building 7, and Gulf of Tonkin, you say to yourself, there was no war in Vietnam that was legitimate. They set that up. That was a false flag. You say, well, there is no Building 7. That didn't just collapse on its own. They pulled the building. Okay, if you believe that, fine. But what was the incentive to do that? Well, to get in a war, all right? What is the incentive for the U.S. not to have its gold and to have lost it? Well, where's it? What benefit would it be for the United States not to have 8,000 tons of gold? And if somehow the oligarchs took it, or it's hypothecated, whatever it is, they can't get it back, they can't get any other gold. And why is it so important that the U.S. has 8,000 tons of gold? We know why it's important. Why the Gulf of Tonkin was presented as an attack on U.S. ships, so they can get involved in Vietnam. So you can support conspiracy theories based on motive. That doesn't mean they're provable and you can say definitively that this happened. Oh, in some cases now there's evidence that World War II was started with the United States involvement also, based on some faulty intelligence that the Franklin Roosevelt was hankering to get into the war, and he kind of allowed the attack on Pearl Harbor. Okay, but you can put together the narrative and say the United States wanted to get involved in World War II, so this happened. You say the United States wanted to get involved in Vietnam, so Gulf of Tonkin. The United States wanted to appear like it didn't have any gold, so it doesn't have any gold. I don't get it. If the United States can pull off getting itself involved in winning wars and dominating the world, it somehow can't come up with 8,000 tons of gold. That doesn't make a stitch of sense to me at all. It isn't that the U.S. if Fiona believes this stuff too, it looks like. It isn't that the U.S. can't get the gold. It looks like the majority of the rulers in the U.S. are not concerned about the well-being of the country, and at least gold, and gold is not of their concern either. That's quite possible. That's another point. As I pointed out at the very beginning, if it was important for the United States to have 8,000 tons of gold, they would have it. Now, if the United States deems it's not important to have it, then who cares? Because if it ever did matter, they could get it. They can invade a country, like people say, and just take their mines. They can print up Federal Reserve notes and buy it. I'm all for speculation. I'm not against people speculating. I'm not for always trusting the official narrative or trusting the numbers and all the official numbers. But what I'm also for is not just distrusting everything and making up stuff that doesn't make any sense just because it fits a particular narrative. Gold hopium is like impeachment hopium, says Carl Joseph DeMarco. They keep telling you what's going to happen, but it never happens. But people keep believing. Yeah, I mean, case in point. You're going to impeach the president because you had a phone call with a foreign leader where he asked a question? That's not a crime. But Trump, yeah. Okay, see, the thing is, it's almost the same lack of... It's really when you get into mob rule and you lose the concept of the rule of law. Well, Trump's guilty of something, so it might as well be this. I mean, that's the mentality. We might as well get him on this. All right. Philip. QE4 is here. Well, it's not really. Remember, QE is actually a U. There's a lot of channels have this wrong. They're calling the Fed a pawn shop. No. When the Fed gets involved in the repo market, it's just loaning money. It's making cash available overnight and it's taking collateral. It's not the same thing as going out and buying lock, stock, and barrel distressed assets and then putting them on their balance sheet. It's a big, big difference. So I call it QEPO, but it's not really QE in the same sense. It's a way of adding liquidity. It's short term. It's not helping the bank's balance sheets at all. The banks aren't in trouble. They just don't have enough cash to lend on the short term basis. And it's part because of Dodd-Frank. It's the way their capital structure is set up. It doesn't mean that they're not properly capitalized or adequately capitalized. It means they're not properly capitalized to make short-term loans, and that's what the Fed comes in and does. A lot of people are getting they're getting all excited about it, and they're getting people all riled up, and then, of course, you're defending the Fed. No, I'm not. The Fed is the reason for this problem in the first place. But this in and of itself is just what they have to do, given that they've created the problem. There we go. Fiat currency is only created through debt. We know that. For the reason why debt total increases every year without banks could not receive payment with interest from previous, the snowball US is close. I don't know what that means. All right. So AUAG says food, water, heat, and a good roof is the real gold. That is correct. Philip Quinn, AUAG could be default currency, Lewis. Yes, we've talked about this. We talked about, I think we did Smaulgld's money matrix. I actually said, if you want to score silver in an economic crisis, not necessarily Mad Max, but an economic crisis, silver is the best because it is that at that point it's money. If you cannot use digital cash, if you can't use cryptocurrencies, if you can't use your credit card, you can't use your debit card, there's not enough cash. There really isn't enough physical cash. You know that 2/3 of America's cash is overseas, so there really isn't enough cash. So silver, if you had it in dimes and quarters, that would be a good default currency. But it wouldn't mean, unless it was permanent, that somehow we couldn't get the lights back on, that we're going to return. Just like if we run out of gas for whatever reason, temporarily, and people start riding horses for a few weeks, doesn't mean that that's what people are going to do. They're going to try to get the cars back. They're going to try to work with horses. Oh, this works fine now. Better times, same with silver. So silver and gold can serve, again, but I think temporarily, as mediums of exchange. There is some value in silver in that is, I would say, there's an under premium in that. I think the junk, we had a whole show on this, on junk silver. Go back and watch it. We talked about this. Junk silver has very little premium right now because people who want silver want the real thing. They want the 999 silver. They don't care about these little bits and pieces of worn out silver. Well, if you actually want barterable silver, that's the cheapest way to get it because 1/10 ounce silver coins are very expensive because you pay a fabrication charge. You pay nothing on a dime. It's all subsumed in your junk silver price, and that makes it, I think there's no premium on that, but if there was a situation where barter silver became in demand, well, then the premium for that goes way up, and we've seen it go way up in the past. So right now, I think that's undervalued silver. Right, and he says knowledge, skill, and self-reliance is wealth. Is that correct? That is correct. Goofus, Smaulgld. Been watching your channel for a while now. Always interesting thoughts. Just got here tonight and wondering what you think silver's weapon is. Maybe you said it earlier. Thanks. Yeah, the secret weapon is not yoga pants, Goofus. I hope you go back and listen, but if you missed it, it's gold. Yeah, gold is silver's secret weapon. It's not really that secret, but if gold takes off, silver will follow. Dr. Jim is entertaining, swing for the fences. Yeah, he is entertaining. The difference is that people then repeat him, and then people believe everything that he says. I don't think he believes everything he says. Yeah, he does. And sometimes he does really good analysis. But the idea is what people mistake is sometimes good analysis and then let's fill in the blanks analysis. That's where, unless someone's pointing out, like, that's speculation, that part of it. Oh, and that doesn't necessarily flow from that. Other things could have happened. Other things could happen. I remember Jim Willey said, it was, I think it was November 2000, never forget this. This is when everyone was saying the Fed can't raise rates. And he said, if anyone thinks the Fed is going to raise interest rates tomorrow, they're a moron. They're a moron. That's right, I said it. He sounded like Mark Levin. And, of course, they raised interest rates. And they said, well, they didn't really raise it. Peter Schiff did the same thing. They're not really raising rates. Well, they only raise them once. Oh, they only raise them twice. Oh, they only raise them 3 times. Oh, they raise them 4 times. I was righter than everyone else because everyone else thought they'd raise them 22 times. No, you were wrong. You said they would never raise them. And then you try to say they didn't raise them. Yeah. Anyway, I have all of my blog posts on that where I said they would raise them. And then after they raised them, I said they would raise them again. All right, let's see here. AUAG. Yeah, Silverstein said pull. I mean, there's a lot of... look, I'm not going to argue on building 7. I mean, it collapsed. I mean, it's hard. People try to make arguments. Say, well, it's like, what happens? Okay, where else did it happen? But the gold one at Fort Knox, I'm not buying it. I don't understand where the, other than the fact that it hasn't been audited. That does not, that in law that means nothing. The absence of an audit doesn't mean that there's not gold there. Now, it may raise your suspicions, but it doesn't mean that you should go around and insist to the world that there's no gold at Fort Knox. And that you rather believe without any evidence that it's been lent out, hypothecated, stolen in the middle of the night, and somehow the United States is impotent and cannot get 8,000 tons, or as Fiona says, is to the point where it says it doesn't matter. Well, I could believe it doesn't matter. I could believe it's all gone, but then the United States would say it's all gone, it doesn't matter. We sold it. Who cares? Look, England did that. England said, we don't need gold anymore. It's gone. Switzerland sold half their gold. Gone. Did not change the tenor of the Swiss franc as a safe haven asset. Didn't matter. So the United States could say it's gone. I think the United States does view it as a nuisance that they have to maintain Fort Knox and they don't want to do an audit. But I think if it was important, the United States clearly can have anything it wants. Unless Hillary Clinton gives it away. Uranium. All right. What else do we have? People should think for themselves, question everything, says Philip, and use critical thinking skills. Yeah, well, that's kind of hard. I think a lot of people think that critical thinking skills are going on YouTube and doing, quote, research and watching a lot of gibberish and then thinking they're woke. They learned something because they heard something different than they heard on the mainstream media. So they say, well, now I know something because I heard this and there's a different perspective, and that substitutes for critical thinking. What they don't do is they don't listen to the nonsense that they hear on alternative financial media channels and criticize that. They just assume because it's a different perspective that somehow it was arrived at through a critical thinking process. 143 Druid, we live in the Matrix, not the Toyota Matrix. Yes, indeed. Denmark. That's right. I forgot AUAG 99s in Denmark. You're up late tonight. Yes, so we'll be like gold on steroids. Greenspan. Goofus, thanks. I always enjoy your thoughts. Smaulgld, thank you. Philip, thank you. I want to hear your outside-the-box analysis so I can make prudent decisions. Much appreciated. Fiona, Jim is an interesting fellow. I think half of what he says is crap, half is spot on. I agree with that. I think he's earnest. I think some of the stuff he says is spot on. Some of it's like, you got to be kidding me. And I think he does it on pay. It could be. Could be. Bowenski is here. Follow the money, he says. All right, everyone, I've kept you far too long. I do want to thank you for joining me tonight. Tomorrow is Solid Gold Sunday, and I will have some very interesting charts on gold, which will kind of tie together why today's silver secret weapon is gold. And then tomorrow you're going to see what gold has up his or her sleeve. All right. Let's see. I don't want to miss. I always go back and when I upload the show to BitChute, I see comments that I missed. So if there's anything here, I don't want to miss any. No, looks like I got them all. So thank you very much. And do you want to hear Bernie? Yeah, we'll save him for tomorrow night. Have a good night.